Hey everyone, this is Matthew with another language learning video, and today I want to begin a series that I am wanting to call Language Learning Stories. And the first installment of the Language Learning Stories is going to be about the first language that I really truly fell in love with, so to speak, and that was the language of Latin. And some would call Latin a dead language. I don't particularly see it that way. There are no native speakers, so to speak, but there are a number of Latin speakers in the world. But the true story behind Latin is not necessarily in the number of speakers that are alive in the world, but in the impact ongoing that the Latin language has had across hundreds of millions of people on the planet right now. And there is a great video by Paul of the Lang Focus channel that I'll send that I will post a link to on the description box for this video, where he talks about the Romance languages as a family. So I'll leave that to that video. But for me, I said in a previous video as well that I had studied French in high school, middle school, and in high school. And then I found out that we had a Latin course available at my school, and it was 50% language and 50% Roman history. Now, for me, as a fan of history, as someone who history would really appeal to, especially Roman history, that was an immediate draw to me. And I immediately jumped on the opportunity to be in that class. And the language study was different in that Latin class than it had been in my previous language classes. I can remember the first day, and I'll give a shout out to my Latin teacher, Mr. P, if he's still out there. I really enjoyed his instructions. But the very first day we went over declension exercises. And if you've ever studied Latin, you know what that means. But that was the first language that I had studied that had a declension, so to speak, a declension system. Now, obviously, there are still some languages that have those, German being one, Russian being one, but that is a very different concept to a native English speaker. So that was a new challenge for me. But still, we did the drills and everything, and it started to click for me. And it was really one of the first languages that I had this draw from a historical standpoint as well as a language study standpoint, and I could eventually get to the point where I could read Latin in a fairly easily standpoint. Now, it wasn't advanced material, but it was historical material. It was original material written by Roman contemporary writers at the time, and for me, would I recommend someone studying Latin? Possibly, possibly. It would depend on what a person's interests are, what a person's goals are. There are some who would say that you are wasting your time studying Latin. Just study a language that is spoken. I totally understand that. There are others who would say, why waste your time studying one, for example, why waste your time studying one of the Romance languages when you could study the mother language of all Romance languages, and then that would enable you to be adapted to the other Romance languages. I understand that as well. I I'm not going to take a concrete position on that necessarily, because I see beauty in both scenarios. For me, I'm not necessarily striving to be a Latin speaker. I'm not currently studying Latin right now, but I'm not striving to be a Latin speaker. But I would at some point love to be able to read material in Latin, whether it's ecclesiastical material, historical material, Roman material. At one point, Latin was the political language as late as the 18th century, the lingua franca of the world as late as the 18th century. All of that appeals to me, and I suspect that there are hundreds of thousands of other people, maybe I should say thousands, of people who that would also appeal to. And the ability to read that language is something that can never be taken away from someone. It is something that you will always have. And to say nothing of the legal professions and the medical professions and ecclesiastical professions that all have exposure to Latin as a basis, as a foundation. And I will say that in many ways, even to this day, my studies of Romance languages has been aided and benefited by the foundation that I had in studying Latin. And I took 2 years at the high school level, Latin 1, Latin 2, and then I needed a language credit at the college level, so I took one semester of Latin at the university level when that was available where I was at the time. And I still enjoy it. I still have my original box of note cards that I made for that because it's a reminder of the work that I did that honestly I believe set the foundation for what I'm able to do today. Now I am by no means where I want to be ultimately. I'm still on that journey, as I've said before. But Latin was a very good starting point, and I shouldn't say starting point because I had already studied French for a while. But Latin formed the foundation that is now making my Spanish studies much more smooth, and it's making my continued studies with French much more smooth because I see the common denominators and I see the foundations of the words. And so what I would say is, if you think that you are a student of history, and if you think that you would love, if you've loved watching movies about the Roman Empire, if you've loved reading books about the Roman Empire, if you've loved any type of study in that era of history, that antiquity, classical era, right around the turn of the Christian era, if that realm of material appeals to you in the least, and as at the same time you are a language learner or an enthusiast of languages, then Latin may be for you. Keep in mind, you're not necessarily going to bump into a Latin speaker walking down the sidewalk, but it will enable you potentially to open the door for study for Romance languages, the entire Romance family, as well as a major component of our vocabulary in English. And I would say this: I see as much value, if not more value, in studying Latin as I would studying constructed languages such as Esperanto or anything else like that. Now, Esperanto probably has more speakers than Latin, obviously. And in fact, I will say Esperanto definitely has more speakers than Latin. However, there is a direct link, an original link, an organic, if you will, an organic link to all of the Romance languages, because that is the foundation, that is the source. So if you fit those categories, then Latin may be something that would be enjoyable for you. At some point when I can reinitiate my Latin studies down in the future, I'd love to go back to some of those Roman texts, those classical texts, and be able to read those, and just to read that from the original language, from the original author, and what he or she was trying to say. And so that's the first installment of my language learning stories. I'm going to be doing some more of these along, but that was what I wanted to tell you about my love and appreciation for the Latin language. And remember, again, if you like the videos, please subscribe, hit the notification bell so you don't miss anything. Tell me what you think in the comments. If you've ever studied Latin before, or if you've seen it online and it's looked familiar because you could read Spanish or Italian and you just don't know what the connection was, well, that's the connection. It is the foundation mother language of the entire Romance family. And again, I'm going to link to the Lang Focus video where he explains the entire connection as well. But remember, keep up with us. Thank you for watching. Hope to see you soon.